Welcome back to Retro Crazy. It's a revisit on the Nintendo 2DS. Initially it was opened to replace the screen, however, once we got the board out we found a small couple of pieces which led to spotting that there was a crack across the board here. This tab was missing, this pad completely missing, and I'm not sure about these here. So I have to check those for continuity. I'm going to start just by zooming in a bit because I want to clean up these tracks so I can actually run a piece of wire between them to make the connection. This one I'll wait until I have the replacement switch in before cleaning up and running the track, and I'll run it from the leg of the switch to a section of the trace, and then these I'll solder and then check the continuity slightly further down the board. Now, one of the other things I'm going to be doing, because I did notice it was quite noisy, is I'm going to be replacing the speaker. There's some damage on it there. I'm wondering if that's got more hidden. So I will be starting off by removing the speaker from the board itself. That gives me a little bit more wiggle room to move this around. Here's the replacement switch. As you can see, it's got contact pads on both sides, and then the 3 track points. This is obviously upside down, but this is a brand new replacement switch which has got to fit in there. And I'm just going to take off the protective coating. I want to get back down to the copper underneath. I'm going to do the same on both sides. While I could take a wire just from this straight down, so I don't need to clean this up. I can use the solder point here. I will be recoating the varnish protection on the board once I'm done, just so that their connection point has something to protect it. These are much finer and I'll be checking them later. However, you can see this pad goes down to this via, so I can always run the wire right down to the via, and it does look like this could be part of the ground plane, so I can even take something from here to the opposite side via this solder pad. Let's fire up the soldering iron, and first thing to remove will be the speaker. Anybody that has seen any of my previous videos knows I use a little bit of flux to remove the speaker or any solder connectors, and my preference is to use Q-tip just to precisely get the flux into place. Some people will be saying it's not the best, which I agree, because you can get fibres left from the acute tip itself. Now you may hear the smoke extraction, which is built into my solder station. At some point I'll go through a full rundown of the stuff I use. Smoke absorption is one of the paramount reasons for me using this. So I'm just putting a little bit of pressure on the speaker. There's one. There's two. Now onto these contact points, which by comparison are minuscule. So again, I'm going to add some flux. And once I've added the flux, I'm going to remove the current solder so I can get a better idea of what I'm working with. Under magnification, that does look like a lot. It's not as bad as it looks, I promise you. So I'm just going to use some solder braid, which is the best way to remove the solder. Not ideal with flux on it, however, doing this will allow it to attract. I'm just keeping a little bit of pressure on, moving it around to feel, when it's all gone. There we go. That looks much better. And what happens is it gets sucked up into the wick. The copper absorbs it quite nicely. Next step is going to be fitting this switch. Which will sit just on the pads here. Now it's quite a small fiddly job, but it's going to sit somewhere like that. And what I may do is just try and put a little bit of fresh solder on the existing pads, so that when this lines up, everything just drops in and is fine. This is the switch, and as you can see, I have taken the tabs either side and reshaped them. The holes in the board, or the pads in the board should I say, are not through holes. So those tabs were actually lifting the switch, I believe, a little bit further than it should have. So by flattening the tabs, it'll allow it to sit down onto the board and these rear contact points to match up with where they should be. Looking at the original, you can see that it's flush at the front, although a little bit buckled, and plenty of solder at the sides and the back. I also took the risk off camera after having looked at the other side of the board and realizing that there was a massive bubble where the board was bent in at that tip. And what I did is I took a massive risk of just holding that with a pair of pliers and gently bending it back out. That was rather worrying, but it straightened. It straightened considerably, and you can now see that this again looks more like a square shape. This edge was in about here originally. Hasn't affected anything else because it's just a one track going down, and on the other side it's a single ground plane. So the final bit, we'll be seeing if we can get this reattached. So I'm just going to start by putting a little bit of fresh flux on the one contact pad only. The reason for this is I'm actually going to put the chip on just on one side. Once it's on one side and I'm happy, then I'll reflow the existing pads that are there to make sure that they've got good connection. Don't try and drop them all on in one go unless you're using something like a heat gun. I'm a little bit wary to use a heat gun on something that's got meltable, potentially, components, like the button or the plastic casing. It's probably fine up to a certain temperature. However, I'm simply going to use a soldering iron to show you that this is possible. So again, we've got fume extraction going on, and I'm going to add just a little bit of solder. There's now a small piece of solder on there. And this is where the fun begins. I'm right-handed. I'm going to attempt to hold the chip in place with my the button in place with my left hand. And if I know I'm going to have to use my right hand to hold the button so I can access the solder pad with my left hand. It's going to make life interesting. I may put a little bit of solder on there first. In fact, let's just see what happens. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's already broken, so I can't break it really any further. It's already a non-working shoulder button. So let's see what happens. Well, it's in place. I'm going to put some pressure top and bottom, and I'm just going to reheat it. Yep, thought it was sitting high. That's fine. and hopefully it is initially held in place. I need to do a little bit of more close-up inspection. So let's zoom in a bit. It's relatively flush with the top. Does look like it should come back a little bit though on the left hand side, which is fine. I've got plenty of space here to solder, plenty here, and of course there's no pad here, so we will be working on that separately. I'm just going to do a little bit of readjusting on this pad and we'll see how we get on. Just see if we can move this switch back fractionally. It's nicely lined up. Unfortunately, it's now slightly too far over to the side. This is very much trial and error. Flush, middle of the pads. Height is looking reasonably good. So again, I'm going to hold this top and bottom. And there we go. It's in place. Next, I'm going to solder these two pads. So again, a little bit more flux. And this pad over here, I realise I haven't put any extra flux on it. Looks like good contact down there. This side a little bit more awkward to get to and see, but the solder does appear to go right down to the bottom of the board. I will check that off camera just to make sure. So we'll do a quick bit of cleanup on this and then we'll do some testing. go. So if we follow the circuit, you can see this middle pin comes down to here. There's some fibers, or there are some fibers from the Q-tip. And this does indeed look like a part of the ground plane, so the continuity test for this is straightforward. I can check here to here, make sure we've got continuity. The via here I'll clean up a little bit, and this one just make sure that we have continuity down to both, and that will be our test. Very careful on the vias. I just want a little bit exposed to get a test. On this, I will leave the via alone. I am hoping that is enough. We'll find out in a second. Grabbing my meter. Set to continuity. And if you remember, you should get a beep when we've got continuity. So continuity across the casing, which is to be expected, and continuity down to this via here, sorry, this point here. So this is fine, this is connected. Next one to check is here. That's to middle switch. Which is absolutely fine. How to fix these missing sections? I'm going to use a piece of wire from here to here. I will also do the same for this one. Interesting to note that it does look like, and I have some very thin wire, believe it or not. This is one of the thinnest that I have. Now for this, I am simply going to break off the outer sheath, leaving the wire itself. I'll attach this here and then pull it down to here, making sure that both sections are fully connected. I'm just going to tin these contact points here. I need to scrape off the section here, or I can just take it straight across. That would work as well. Although having two wires terminating at the same place, which is very small, is maybe not ideal. I could take it round and just join it on here as well. However, I will, I think, possibly take it down and join it here to give some added strength to the button, because by the time this is soldered as well, it may be quite small, but the thickness of the wire plus the solder will give a little bit added strength to the attachment of the button, especially for long-term use and reliability. In with some solder paste, some flux for this connection first. Well, it seems to be down and connected. Certainly rigid enough. The button is not as positive as the original. Let's finish the other connection. We will see how it is once it's built. I'm doing a quick clean-up again, just to see in a bit more detail what's going on here. Since launching this channel, I've been plagued with bad luck. This video so far has had exposure lock issues, and now the mic has just failed, so apologies if I don't have the normal commentary over this section. I'm re-recording this after the fact. Just tidying up the board here to make sure everything's fine before moving on and continuing. So some 99.9% isopropyl alcohol and then a good cleanup. So next is going to be taking a connector down to this point. So I'm just going to clean up the conformal coating to reveal the copper underneath. It'll give me something to directly solder to. I know under magnification this looks like quite a large area, but trust me, the area that I'm clearing up is only, you know, a mil across. It's very, very small. I can add some more flux and I'm ready to tin this contact. So a nice bit of solder onto the cleaned up area, and now I can get everything done. I did try to solder directly onto this, however the pad on the button is so small, I've decided to actually tin the wire and try and heat it directly onto the end. So it's a butt joint. It's not the strongest by comparison to any other type of solder joint. However, it will give a good contact. So a good way to check and see if you've got a good solder is to do this wiggle test. If the solder breaks off, it's not worked. This did not break off, so it's soldered onto the ground plane of the board, the motherboard, no problem.